Hello everybody, what's up? I am Felris. We are sailing the seas of Raid Shadow Legends today, and today I am joined by a very special guest, someone I am very pleased to have on the channel. It is Colred from Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. Colred, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great today, man. I'm excited to be able to do this collaboration. I know we're going to talk some live arena. That's not content that I usually cover that much, but I like playing it, so I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know you're one of the best free-to-play content creators out there, and we do a lot of live arena on this channel, so I really wanted to get your thoughts, your opinions on particularly progression in live arena and some of the best strategies and champions that, my viewers can use, because I know a lot of them struggle with live arena. I don't know if yours do too, but I know a lot of mine do, and a lot of them don't like it because they lose a lot. So
yeah, I think one of the things that you have to get used to shifting from, say, classic arena or 3v3 arena to live arena is that your win rate is going to plummet comparatively. It's a different animal, and you have to get more comfortable with losing, and that can be frustrating.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know I have a 49% win rate in live arena, I think currently.
There you go.
We can check that, but 49% is not much. That's less than half.
Yeah. And you can still progress winning less than half. I think mine is below 50 as well. For a long time, I was floating around 52 or 53%, but as I've gotten closer to my maximum, I've started to drop below 50%. But the good news is you still get more points for a win than a loss, than you lose for a loss. So you can, I'm in gold 2 right now, and I'm climbing up. I'm almost at gold 3. And yeah, and I'm still kind of, with a 45 to 48% win rate, I'm still climbing decently.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it gets harder as you go into gold, because I was watching another content creator and I forgot you don't actually lose points when you lose in bronze, like I completely forgot about that. But it is much easier to climb. You're still going to climb, you're still going to accumulate those victories that you need to get your chests and everything. Those chests give you primal quartz. The primal quartz gives you mythicals, at least eventually. So a very good investment, live arena. And it also helps push your stats higher, like on your account, so that you can do your PvE content better. I recently ripped all my gear off all my champions. I actually did this on stream and just rebuilt my most important ones from the ground up. And I actually was able to push my speed and my stats higher than I was able to before. So I think it's a great progression tool as well if you push live arena.
It is. And I think it must have been last year's free-to-play challenge. I got into live arena and I was surprised at how well I could do even right when it opened. As soon as I unlocked it, I started getting in there, and that allowed me to get area bonuses that made life so much easier than, the previous time I had started an account. And sometimes you don't need a lot, but a little bit of accuracy, a little bit of speed in a place like Fire Knight can be massively helpful. And those first few levels really aren't difficult to get, especially even for like faction wars. You can use them for faction wars, and the faction war bonuses, the area bonuses, are really cheap. So if you just need a little bit of help pushing faction wars, it's not a bad place to go either.
Oh, yeah. I actually haven't invested at all in faction wars, but what I have done is I have fully upgraded ignore defense, speed, and crit damage for Hydra. That was my first priority. And we're getting almost 100 million on Brutal now, which is pretty good.
Nice. Yeah, that's very good.
Very good investment, live arena. Very good investment. So we are going to be talking about some of the best strategies, some of the best champions that you can use to push your live arena even higher, to get that win rate up, to get more of those primal shards, more of those area bonuses. Colred, what is your first thought in regards to something that our viewers could use to push their live arena performance higher?
All right, well, that's actually a more complicated question than it seems on the surface, because at least on my channel, I have a wide variety of play styles from my viewers. Some of my viewers are free to play, some of them are early and mid game. I have some whales who are like super late game, and everything in between. And so I'm going to answer for my play style first, and then people can kind of extrapolate based on that. But as a free-to-play player who's relatively, progressed in my account when Live Arena came out, what I really focused on were, first of all, just my regular arena champions, right? I brought those champions in. So my Arbiter, my Deacon Armstrong, whatever my nukers were, my Genbo, I started to use those. And one of the things I think is great about live arena is that you're manualing the fights in a lot of cases, right? You don't play that mode on full auto. And so as a result, you get a feel for which of your champions actually fit the mode. And some of that is like the bans and all of those things. But I would say, you start with any of your arena champions, and then you start to think about other champions that you've built really well, because as a free-to-play player, you don't want to rebuild a ton of people if you don't have to. But the champions you built really well for PvE, who might be a surprise pick or might create, like a counter that your opponent isn't expecting. So in that case, it might be a free champion like Mithrala. If you have your Mithrala, I think she's amazing in live arena, especially early on, because you're going to have that high resist cleanser, and that's super valuable. Plus, you've got an increased attack or an increased defense that helps all of your nukers. You've got a shield and a strengthen, which means she's going to be hard to remove from the board. You've got that hex, which improves damage, and then the petrification, which disrupts the enemy. And it's like, she was my best built champion anyway when I got to live arena. And I just started throwing her in everywhere. And she either got banned or she disrupted the whole match. So depending on where someone is and what their roster looks like, I would say start with your best built champions and just see how they perform, and if you can find a composition that works for them. And then start thinking about other champions that you might want to rebuild for live arena later.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some accessible champions. I mean, like you were talking about, Deacon Armstrong. I've gotten wrecked by Deacon Armstrong in live arena. You have to build him super, super fast, which is kind of hard because his base speed is a bit low for a speed booster. But if you can get him, 370 speed and in gold, right? In gold, I think that's what you're probably shooting for a Deacon Armstrong. This A3 is massive. It's massive. The pushback on the turn meter is so effective. Plus the extra turn, drop defense, which he'll boost your nukers. He'll push back the opponent, so you're going to definitely be taking a turn before them. You'll put up the decreased defense, and your nukers will just wipe them into oblivion. It's massive. Now, as I keep climbing higher, I see less Deacon Armstrongs that are built well. So I see the same amount of Deacons, but less that are built well. So he may fall off a little bit, and that's probably because of the base speed. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say it's a mix of things. Yeah, no, I agree. And really the champion is less important than the role that they're filling on the roster, right? So if you're trying to build a go first team and you're trying to pick a go first team, you have to have multiple turn meter fillers, because one of them's probably going to get banned out. If you have an Arbiter go first team, Arbiter may get banned out, which means that you need at least one, if not two. Really, you probably need 2 additional turn meter fillers and then 2 nukers. Right? So you're forcing your opponent to pick their poison. Do they want to try to slow you down and potentially, like break your speed tune? Or do they want to try to ban out your nukers and hopefully survive that first nuke and then come back and wipe out your fragile go first team? But either way, you need probably 3 turn meter fillers and 2 nukers, because if you only pick 2 turn meter fillers, they're going to ban your fastest one and you're going to lose, you're going to get your speed tune broken. So Deacon doesn't need to be your fastest champion. He needs to be fast enough to stay connected to the other 2 turn meter fillers you're using. So I use Arbiter, and at the time when I was using Deacon, I was using Arbiter, and then I was using Lady Kimmy. And so I was doing Arbiter, Lady Kimmy, and Deacon Armstrong. Now, the downside to Lady Kimmy is that she doesn't have an increased attack buff, right? But she does have a buff strip. So that allowed me some flexibility there. Then when Astrid became a fusion, I replaced Lady Kimmy with Astrid. So then it was Arbiter, Astrid, Deacon. And now I don't need Deacon anymore because I picked up Shu Zhen. So now it's like Arbiter, Shu Zhen, and then maybe Astrid. And it's like, so it's really hard to ban me out because my Arbiter is at 410 speed and my Shu Zhen is at like 380 speed. So, pick your poison. I don't mind which one goes first, and nobody bans Astrid, because why do it?
I do. I do.
Well, would you ban her over Shu Zhen is my point.
Yes, I would actually.
You would? Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I have more trouble dealing with Astrid, call her Astrid, but whatever, than I do any other champion.
It's Yostrid, actually.
Heffrak.
Technically, it's Yostrid. That's the way to pronounce it, but I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, no, I always ban Astrid if there's no Armons. Sometimes I'll ban the Arbiter over Astrid, but I always ban her if I see her on the team, because this champion is the bane of my existence. You know what I mean? Her and Heffrak. Her and Heffrak are my most hated champions in live arena, at least as far as like facing them goes. I have neither.
Yeah.
But as far as facing them, those two are, I mean, she's so strong, right? She's got that extra turn. Is that on the A3? The A3 has an extra turn with increased speed, increased attack.
Yeah, so she's got the same kit as Deacon, but on steroids.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's a weaken instead of defense, but she's got an increased speed in addition to what he brings, and then she's got a slow in addition to the decreased turn meter. She's got an incredibly good kit. And the problem with her, honestly, is if you run Stone Skin, you don't care because she can't decrease your turn meter or slow you or give you the weaken. You really don't worry about Ashen. But if you're not running Stone Skin, she gives you everything in one kit, and so if you're coming up against her without a team in Stone Skin, you're going to have trouble.
Yeah, I mean, and she has the Sleep A1, which is also really good.
Yeah.
She was a fusion, so some of you guys may have her, but definitely Aostrit is a really solid option. You mentioned Lady Kimi. She's really good because she has all the control from the passive here. On the passive, she's going to be decreasing turn meter every time that she places a debuff. She's got 2 debuffs on her A2 with a 15% turn meter pushback as well, which is very strong. And then on the A3, she's got a full, but not a full buff strip, but a single buff strip with a block buffs, which is going to trigger the passive, which is going to do turn meter pushback, as well as increase accuracy and increase speed for your team, which is really good if you run a lot of attack-based debuffers like I do.
Yeah, she's a crazy good champion. I love to use her in a lot of locations, but she's a really good flex pick in Live Arena because you don't actually have like only one path to her skills. Like for, let's say you bring in Arbiter, chances are you're opening with the turn meter fill and increase attack. Like there's no other opening that really makes sense. But here with Lady Kimi, you can actually open with her A2, which has a chance of placing decreased accuracy and decreased speed, plus that turn meter decrease. Or you could go the other route because she does the opposite thing on her A3, where she's going to give you turn meter fill, increase accuracy, and increase speed. Plus on the A3, she can even buff strip and place block buffs, which, like you said, would then activate her passive and give you turn meter fill in addition to that. So, having 2 paths to open with any champion can be a really valuable ability. I think, we talked about Mithrala earlier. She also has that, right? She can open with that cleanse, that A3, or she can open with the Hex and the increased buffs, the increased attack and increased defense. And having that flexibility allows you to build, a starting 5 there that when somebody gets banned out, you're like, oh, I can still use this other skill in this other way. Or, it allows you to pick the same team into more opponents than you would be able to do otherwise, guaranteeing you like champions that you've built well, as opposed to like trying to pick a counter that isn't really fully built, So I love champions like Lady Kimi, yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. The other thing that would screw me up a lot of times in early Classic Arena was Helicath. Helicath is massive because of the 2-turn block damage, which is quite nice, and then all the counterattacking that ignores shields.
Yeah, that especially, I think, catches people by surprise, that he ignores on his A1, he ignores shields and block damage buffs. So he can be a really good pick that will, kind of slide through. People won't think about it. And then you can kill off like, champions that use block damage or that use shields primarily. Plus all that counterattacking can be really nasty. And his multipliers are good. So if you build him for damage, he will absolutely smack. That A2, that AoE with the shield hits so hard. And then his A1 really does also do good work. And if you got a little accuracy on him, you'll even land that weaken. So yeah, he's great as a defensive champ. He's great as an offensive champ. And I can't tell you how many times like I let a Helicath slide through thinking I could handle his block his block damage and his shields, only to get totally smacked by his A2 and be like, well, I didn't expect to nuke Helicath.
Right. I mean, that is one option that I think just in general, a lot of people get a lot of value from and could get a lot of value from. Colred, have you ever come across a nuke Mithrala?
Once or twice, not often, but yes, every once in a while.
It catches you off guard. Like when it's a champ that, a prime example, Prince Kymar, his multipliers are not nuker multipliers, but if he is built as a nuker, he will surprise you. If you can build a champ as a nuker that your opponent will not expect is a nuker, it can give you the element of surprise, we'll say,
Right. And that's a really great tip, I think, because one of the things that, we talk about when we're talking about Live Arena is ban and strategy. Like, who do you use as ban bait, create an expectation in your opponent that, you then distort or, twist, and so that they don't really know what you're going to do, because predictability is ultimately you're going to be your downfall, right? If they know exactly what you're going to do, they're going to be able to counter it more easily. So I think, I've come across a ton of champions you wouldn't expect to hit hard who can hit hard. Freya is occasionally built like that. I've seen her built that way. Definitely nuke UDKs. Those always catch me by surprise. I see those fairly frequently. There are additional champions. I'm trying to think of who was one recently caught me by surprise, like really by surprise. If I think of it, I'll let you know. But it was like not, it was a support champion. I actually banned, they only had one nuker. I banned their one nuker and I just assumed I would win. Right. And then they had some support who just smacked me around and I was like, okay, I didn't even know that champion could nuke.
I mean, that's the danger. I think Seeker is another one who you could build. I think he hits pretty hard. Or at least I've come across some Seekers who can hit pretty hard. He's also got the turn meter fill, right? He's got the increased attack. Same turn meter fill as Arbiter, actually. Just not nearly as fast.
No, but it's on a 2-turn cooldown, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is.
Because of the extra turn mechanic, you've only got one turn without that turn meter fill. So it's like, and if you have them in Relentless, sometimes you can go back to back. So I run my Seeker in Relentless at around 200 and I think 285 or something like that, which is pretty fast for a Relentless set. Yeah. And man, he is nasty in Arena. By the way, he's a great flex pick as well, because he can actually be your Arena lead if you want. He's got a really nice passive that when he takes a crit, he will give everybody an increased defense, kind of retroactively or reactively. So if you have him as the lead, he'll protect everybody behind him. And then he even heals himself on that crit as well. So you can have him as your fastest champion on a go second team. Again, that flex pick allows you a lot of, less predictability, I guess, for your opponent to kind of figure out what you're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the ultimate ban bait, it's going to be Armons, right? If you can pick Armons, you can basically pick whatever other team you want, because that they are going to ban Armons unless you have a Marius or sometimes a mythical, in which he'll sometimes ban the Marius or the mythical. But you're probably not struggling in live arena if you have Marius. And so
Marius is talk about banes. He's the bane of my existence currently. I don't have mine yet, and I swear to God, he is a nightmare to deal with. Yeah, where I am. And then Armons, honestly, I got so tired of Armons that I just started building my team to allow Armons through so that I could ban somebody else and pick around Armons, because everybody kind of uses him as ban bait. So I'm like, well, let's see if he's actually good for you. And for some people, he's very good and he ends up winning the match. But it just allows me sort of like a great first pick or second pick. Because if I'm not picking Armand, I've got an extra spot in my roster. Maybe I can slip Odin in, or maybe I can slip, like another damage dealer in, or I can get Lady Mikage in or something like that. That gives me additional flexibility. And I have stopped picking Armands myself, and I don't ban them anymore. And it actually works out more often than not. But I had to really intentionally design my team to do that.
Right. I mean, I still first pick Armands every time I can. He's running at 309 speed for me, which isn't the best, but it's a fair speed, I think, because I was lucky enough to pull Kaleth. And I think so far from my testing of Kaleth, he needs a turn meter booster to run with him. So if I can force the ban on the Armons, then my Arbiter, after my account rebuild, after I rearranged all my gear, she's now running at 367 speed, which is pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So that's my fastest champ. If I can force them to ban Armons and pick Arbiter, now there is a very high chance that they pick Arbiter instead of Armons, which case I fall back on Grand Oak Padraig, who is my second fastest champ. And he is a very underrated PvP champion.
Yeah, he's actually pretty cool. I mean, he's got that nice turn meter fill. Plus he's got, is it the cleanse? He's got a cleanse, right? Is it a cleanse?
Yep, he's got turn meter fill, cleanse, increased speed, all on the same ability, all on a 3-turn cooldown.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I use mine primarily in Hydra. But yeah, turn meter fill is 20%, which is solid, plus the cleanse and the increased speed. So that's really that skill. And then it's always good. Again, we're talking about champions that have two pathways to their opening. Like his ally attack is a great way to get around a UDK. It's a great way to handle all sorts of like kind of tricky situations. Like if somebody picks a Necrit, and you're trying to like work through the protection on the nuker, you know, having those extra ally attacks. It helps to go into like a Rotos who's got that passive, which can protect him from your nukers. So there are champions who get picked a lot in Live Arena that an ally attack can help you with. And Grand Oak Podrick is a very good champion for that, you know, both his A2 and his A3.
Yeah, and even the A1, you know, I run Evil Eye on him to give him some turn meter control since I use him so much in Live Arena. But the A1 has cooldown reduction and a very good chance of cooldown reduction as well.
Yeah, 50%.
So it's a 2-turn cooldown reduction, I think. Yeah, it's a 2-turn cooldown reduction. So slight counter to like Yumiko or Warlord or whoever if you're going up against definitely Alice, right? So slight counters to them.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
I really like running him alongside Tribune Heraclides because he's my UDK counter. Of course, he's got the A2 that ignores 100% defense. I run him in Cracking Roots, specifically to UDK counter, and he will break Stone Skin, which is pretty sweet, so we can ally attack into the UDK. The A1 hits fair. We can potentially put a fear on them if we don't kill them, you know, all that kind of stuff from Tribune Heraclides, who is another really odd pick, by the way, for Live Arena. I just spam his A2 most of the time because he'll reset it every time he kills someone. And with Podrick will give increased defense, which Heraclides needs. He's already at 5k defense with pretty good crit damage. And so he'll just spam the A2
this is where,
constantly.
Yeah, this is where that, well, what I was talking about earlier, like when you first get into Live Arena, you're just taking whatever champions you built well, right? Like, because we all have different rosters. I don't have a single faction unity champion. I don't have any of them. And if I pulled one, it would massively change how I approached Live Arena because they're all powerful in Arena as far as, you know, what the ones I've examined. So if you have, you know, a faction unity champion, you're probably already leaning into them because they're very good champions for PvE as well. Sure. So you may as well experiment. Can you put a team around that? And here's the other thing that I think is nice about champions like the faction unity champions. Not everybody knows what they do because they're rarer champions. You know, so sometimes you can sneak a champion through that is incredibly powerful just because your opponent really doesn't know what that champion does, and they don't realize that that champion is key to your whole team composition. So they'll ban somebody like more obvious ban bait like Armand's and let this crazy powerful champion through that's going to dominate the whole match. So yeah, absolutely. Now, you know, I try to ban faction unity champions when I can, but sometimes you can't. And I don't have any of my own, so I can't counter it with, you know, matching power for power there.
So as far as ban bait goes, you know, there are obviously these really powerful supports, Aostrid, Armands, you know, Duchess, Sifi. These are the champions that are going to be banned the most, you know, top tier Live Arena. But if you're lower down, you probably don't have those champions. Your opponents may or may not have those champions. Corred, who do you think, you know, for our players who don't have those top tier supports is going to be the most likely ban? Is it going to be the nuker, or is it going to be, you know, if they have a mythical, or what do you think that the viewers should plan for?
I think often, at least I find my opponents, if they don't know who to ban, they lean towards the champion with the highest blessing, like the 6-star or 5-star blessing, especially Intimidating Presence or Polymorph. They want to get rid of those. So if they're trying to match my speed, they'll ban Intimidating Presence. If they are, you know, trying to affect my team with a lot of negative effects, debuffs, they're going to ban that Polymorph. And so that could be any champion, really. It could be any champion. Void legendaries, it doesn't really matter if they're awesome or not. They tend to get banned a little bit more frequently. So like my Cardiel, whenever I pick him, he almost always gets banned, even though he's never a key component of my team. Like, he's really versatile. He gives me some flexibility, but he's never the most important aspect. I think, you know, from the flip side, if I'm trying to ban a champion, what I'm always trying to do is diagnose the linchpin of the enemy team. Like, so if the enemy only has one nuker, that's a mistake. I can ban out the nuker and maybe then I can outlast the team and they don't really have a kill threat, you know? Or if it's a go first team, but they forgot to pick a backup turn meter filler, I ban their arbiter or whatever, and now I know I'm going to go multiple times and hopefully I can shut them down that way. So I think you also want to assess your own team in the eyes of your opponent and think, what are they going to believe is the linchpin of my team? and try to fake them out. Like, oh, this is the linchpin. You're like, yeah, it's the Armands. It's totally the Armands. Go ban the Armands, or whoever it happens to be. And sometimes that may just be a famous champion. That may just be like the biggest, most powerful name. You put Duchess on your team and you're like, Duchess really doesn't matter. She's great, but whatever. And then they're going to ban Duchess. So you have to play around with that. It will change as you progress up the tiers. So whoever was getting banned, when you were in Silver 1, it'll be different when you're in Gold 1, and it'll be different when you're in Gold 3. So yeah, you got to experiment with it.
That's really interesting how you described how you pick the ban, because that's not how I pick my ban. The way I pick my ban is I look at all the opposing champions. I say, what can't I deal with? And I ban that, because if I can deal with everyone else, all I need is to be able to deal with everybody. You know what I mean? So it'll often be the Rhodos, the Hefrak, the Aostrid, because I know that those champions are often either in Stone Skin or super fast or both, and I have a bit of a glass cannon team, so I ban them. I don't necessarily look at what's good for them. I look at what's bad for me, and that's a little different.
I actually think it's just the flip side of the same coin. Like in both cases, we're looking at the enemy's win condition. What is their win condition? It's either the thing that makes their team work, or it's the thing that I can't handle because that's what's going to defeat me. So you're looking at it as from like a loss prevention standpoint, where I'm looking at it from a disruptive standpoint. I want to break what they're trying to do. And what you want to do is you want to get rid of the thing that you can't handle, and then you believe your team will win. But in both cases, we're trying to eliminate the enemy's win condition. So I actually think it's more similar than it might appear at first. Yeah.
Right. No, and I mean, that's an excellent point, Figure out which of those methods work for you. I think those are two very good methods. Colred's way of thinking about it is slightly different from mine, but it's basically the same thing. Figure out which of that works for you, and then enact that in your ban. I can tell you the thing that helped me, one of the things that helped me most, this was the second thing. The first thing was I did something like what I just did last week, and I ripped all my gear off my champions and put it back on them better. The second thing I learned is ban strategy, and that really helped me climb up through Live Arena. So that is super important, more important than I think a lot of people probably think. So like sometimes I'll let their nukers through if they have a super good support, but sometimes if I think I can handle their supports, I'll ban the nuker. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And there is a third component. I think what you mentioned is absolutely right. And as you progress, especially as a free-to-play champion, what you're going to free-to-play champion, as a free-to-play player, what you're going to realize is as you get into higher and higher arena, your roster will always be subpar. Your gear will probably always be subpar. So your strategy has to be better, right? The only way you're going to overcome the enemy is by outthinking them. And in a lot of cases, the biggest joy I get out of Live Arena is when this happens, which is I see that my team is the weaker team, but I know there's one path to victory. Like I can envision what that path is, and then I make that path happen exactly the way I predicted, and my enemy never saw it coming. They're like, I've got Marius, and I've got Scythe, and I've got all these crazy 6-star blessings, whatever. And then I come in there with like, a classic gold 5 go first team, but I see the pathway. I ban the one thing that I need to ban, and then they never get a turn. And then I'm like, all right, I just beat a team that had 100K or 200K more power than me. That's gets me going in Live Arena. I love that experience,
Yeah. And while we're talking about champs that you can sneak past the ban, Vizix the Unbowed, everybody has her. She's free. If you don't have her yet, just wait. But Vizix the Unbowed is absolutely fantastic for Live Arena. She's got a slow. She's got ally protection. She's got provoke. She's got a shield on herself. She's got turn meter pushback. This champion is great. And I have found actually when I first got her, I was testing her in arena. If I didn't get Armons, oftentimes I would pick Vizix because she'll do something similar with slowing and crowd control.
Yeah, 100% AoE provoke from a void champion who can't weak hit is incredibly powerful. Again, Stone Skin negates it, but if you're not dealing with Stone Skin, skills like that are incredibly powerful. And on your way up, there will be a lot of tiers of Live Arena where you're not dealing with a ton of Stone Skin.
Right.
So if the entire team doesn't wear stone skin, sometimes what I'll often find is, for instance, this used to happen a lot when I was in like gold 1, probably. Armands would be on the enemy team. They would pick Armands, and Armands would be the one champion they didn't have in stone skin for whatever reason. And it's like, well, if I can crowd control their Armands, then Armands doesn't do anything to me. Or if I can kill him first, and it's like, that's the hardest champion for me to handle. But Vizix handles that kind of situation. Vizix can also handle like a Yostrid, or like if she goes first, you get that provoke out there, and now all of a sudden it's not as big a deal. You still have to deal with the sleep on the A1 maybe, but it's like you get one free turn when you use an AoE provoker. It's kind of like an old school lockout, right? It's not the same as Warlord, but it's trying to do the same thing from a different angle.
I think probably the best arena provoker is Umbral Enchantress, because she will lock everybody for 2 turns, and then they can't cleanse, they can't anything like that. And then your nukers just go in and wipe them, even if you go second. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and while while you don't think of it this way, but like she's a really well-known quantity. Like people know what Umbral Enchantress does, but she's so old school, not that many people run her. And so it can be the kind of thing where, depending on what tier you're in, you pick her, she might get banned. She might be your ban bait, or she'll slide through. And this old school epic will dominate the whole team, and you don't even care, right? Like, she just wins your fight either way. So sometimes if you're like, I'm trying to improve in live arena, who can I build specifically for live arena that might help me? You could go for a champion like Umbral Enchantress. Vizix, you're going to build for a Hydra. Like she's going to go into other teams. You might use her against, Dark Fae or something, or Fire Knight. But Umbral Enchantress is like a specialist, which means you don't have to worry about putting her in an all-around build. You can literally just build her perfectly for live arena, and she'll win you matches like left and right.
Yeah, I mean, and if you don't have your Arbiter yet, definitely do the progress missions. Grab your Arbiter. This champion, I was using this champion at level 50 when I first started Gold Live Arena. I didn't, I had the stuff to take her to 6 stars, but I was conserving my resources, and she still helped me. Like, you don't even need the banner on her. I mean, obviously you want the banner on her. I'm not saying do not invest in your Arbiter, and definitely invest in your Arbiter, but this champion will absolutely help you no matter what level she is if you are struggling in live arena.
The aura doesn't require a level, right? Like the aura is just the aura. She could be level 1. It doesn't matter. It's still 30%. And the turn meter fill on her A3 doesn't require a level. It doesn't require a book. She can do her job at level 1 if she's built fast enough, right? If she goes first, then you're done. Like you win. If she goes first, so often you win. So it's literally just put your fastest gear on her. She doesn't need accuracy. She doesn't need survivability. She doesn't need anything else. Eventually, you'll build her better.
Right.
But right out of the gate, she can help you. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. I have no plans to book my Arbiter. Sometimes I think for the A2, it would be nice, but I don't run her with accuracy anyway. So like, what do I care? You know what I mean? Like I have no plans to book her. My books can go into like Noct the Paralyzer or someone else fun who I can build for content or something.
If you're only using her for arena, then I would say, yeah, that's totally a viable approach. I actually ended up booking mine because I started using her in PvE quite a lot. For a good 6-month period, she was one of my main PvE champions because she creates so many advantages. Even the heal on the A3 is nice for PvE. You've got the A1 weaken at a decently high chance. You've got the decreased duration of enemy buffs, which can be nice in certain locations. So yeah, I used mine for PvE, and that's why I fully booked her out. But you're right. If you're just using her for arena, basically her job is to do one skill once, and that's it.
Exactly. And have the aura. And have the aura. And potentially be your ban bait, because people know that Arbiter is strong. So here's another, but then again, they can only ban one champion. So you bring your Arbiter, you bring your Umbral Enchantress. Who are they gonna, you know what I mean? Like you can do some funky things with it. And some fun things with it. I think the ban is probably the most critical part of any live arena fight, unless you just make it you just completely botch it up in the fight. I think the ban is the most important part. So definitely learning good ban strategy is vital.
There is, I think you're absolutely right, but there is an experience that I have a lot now at the top of gold too, which is that there are teams I come up against, clearly Kraken teams, that it doesn't matter who I ban. There's no path to victory for me. It's like everybody has a 6-star blessing. It's like crazy, like the Siphi's running at 450 speed. There's nothing that I can do to ban out this team. And so, you just take your medicine. It's like you open up the fight, you watch the first hit go, you click concede, and you're just like, all right, I got to move on. Because as a free-to-play player, I'm never going to be able to compete with those rosters. And that's okay. I don't mind because I'm still doing all right.
Yeah, for sure. One champ I've been encountering a lot recently, who I'm starting to hate, but I think I can still deal with him, is Nice. Nice, the Shadow Thief. And that is a top. If you have a Nice, like, definitely be using him in live arena. He's a top tier nuker, top tier disruptor, everything. Nice is great. Nice is great. But when you mentioned Kraken teams, this guy is the first one that popped into my mind, because I think if you have him, you're using him. You know what I mean? He's potentially more annoying than Sigfrind, which is saying something.
Yeah, I see Lazarius a lot. I see Sigfrind a lot. I see Nice a lot. And I've started to see Calamitous a lot. So I get him frequently now.
Okay.
And I think those are probably the most common that I've been seeing in the last few weeks.
So I actually quite like Calamitous. He's the only mythical I have. I got him from my 3rd Primal Shard. And this guy is my best nuker, actually. He out-nukes Thor in Hydra. Yeah. It's crazy. Like, especially on the 2nd form, everything has like over 4 times multipliers. Even his A1 has a 4 times multiplier. It's a fantastic A1. It hits for 500,000 on a decapitated head. It's crazy. And then I put the Irethi Coronet on him, which increases his damage up to 30% for each debuff he places. You know what I mean? Like, the dude is crazy good. The only thing he needs is accuracy.
Oh, actually, there is one other mythical I also see, which is Commodus.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
I do see Commodus a lot. Yeah. And I used to see a lot of Galathir, but I have not seen him much lately. And I think, Calamitous and Commodus are the ones that have been on the rise recently. And then the others that we mentioned, Nice, ever since he came into the game, he's been a steady presence. And for me, the only 2 that I have are Lady Mikage and Mezimel. And I pick Mezimel basically 95% of the time, and she almost always goes through. And she does ignore Stone Skin, which is really nice. It's a single target, of course. But yeah, so that she's my hardest hitting nuker. But I don't think she stands up in terms of damage to some of these other champions like Calamitous and Commodus and stuff.
Yeah, Commodus is nasty. Commodus is just nasty.
Yeah.
I ban him if I can, I'm starting to get to the point where if there's no Aostrid, if there's no Hefrak, there's no Arbiter, I'll ban the nukers, you know what I mean? And sometimes the nukers surprise you and they don't hit hard. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've come across a Wukong recently that just hits like a spaghetti. Like, it's so strange, And
then as soon as you feel comfortable against Wukong, somebody brings out a crazy nuke that just one-shots your whole team, and it's like, so you're damned if you do, damned if you don't with Wukong. Absolutely,
yeah. I actually had to pull my Wukong. I didn't get him for free because I wasn't playing at that point. But I can't decide how to build him, so I just have him unbuilt.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah, I built mine with nuker stats in an all perception. So he's got enough accuracy to buff to buff strip most PvP champions, not the Sifis and the Duchesses and stuff like that, but all the nukers, he'll buff strip them. And then he hits hard enough to nuke out any kind of glass cannon team. He doesn't really do much against tank. And as a result, I don't use him that much in live arena. I do use him in classic arena and 3v3. I also use him in Hydra because he's perfect in that role in Hydra. So he's sort of in an everywhere build for me, but I still get spot usage out of him in live arena.
That makes sense. Yeah, I actually think I probably have the perception gear to do a build similar to that. So, hey, maybe I'll give it a shot. It's
also nice because sometimes you pull really crit damage gloves with crit rate, speed, and accuracy, and you're like, this is a crazy good glove. Who do I put this on? Because it's perception gear. It's like, well, Wukong's a great choice for that. Because that accuracy does play for him as a buff stripper. There are a few other, nukers who have a need for accuracy, but just, typically you're looking for lethal gear or savage gear or merciless or something on those. But yeah, I found perception works really well on both him and surprisingly Newt. It actually works really well on Newt as well.
I don't see a lot of Newt in live arena, and even in regular arena, unless you get him in really great stats. I don't think he's, in my experience at least, he's not the best pick in the world. Similar to a ninja, I would say. Again,
if he's your best built champion, sure, you could throw him in there for a while, but he's not intended for arena. His max HP nuke is specifically a boss killing skill. Same with Ninja. He's a
Right.
boss killer. You know,
Right.
same, it's like bringing Royal Guard into Live Arena. You wouldn't do that either, you know?
Right.
So yeah, you want more somebody who's built to clear waves like Thor, right? Or, you know, any of the classic kind of, you know, Trundas or somebody like that, you know, or Magnar, whatever, you know, like for me, Genbo. Yeah, you want those. But again, you know, depends on how much you have to deal with Stone Skin for the tier that you're in.
Yep. I mean, Thor is the first champion I got in Stone Skin and my best champion in Stone Skin. I think he's great. But guys, always remember that you need to build the champs that you have with your gear, which is why I highly recommend, taking everything apart when you get to Live Arena and putting everything back together. You may be surprised at how much more you can do. I got more than 10 extra speed on my Arbiter last time I did that. Like, that's pretty huge. She's pushing 370 speed now. You know, the next milestone to reach is 400 speed. You know what I mean? And then once I get a 400 speed Arbiter, I probably don't have to worry about her for a while. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's surprising. My Arbiter, I think I said before, is 410. And
Nice.
it feels crazy fast to me. And I got outsped by an Armand's the other day.
Wow.
And I had the intimidating presence, and I had Odin with the Odin aura.
Wow.
And my Arbiter still lost to an Armand's, and I was just like, well, what are you gonna do? You know, because that Armand's is rocking 440 or 450 speed at that point. I'm like,
right.
Good for you. Well done. Well played. You know, like you just tip your hat and you go to the next fight because what else are you gonna do? But honestly, I do think like if you're rocking 370 speed on your Arbiter, you're probably winning, you know, 90% of the speed races with her at least.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the other thing. They're like all these Krakens have now nukers that are pushing 400 speed. And there comes a point where you just have to say, you know what? I know I'm going to take the L and it's going to save me time. So I just got to leave the fight. You know what I mean? That is a legitimate strategy, you know, and it can save you a lot of frustration. So if you find you're losing, or if you know you're going to lose, just leave the fight. It'll save you a lot of frustration.
Absolutely. There is no shame in conceding to a team, especially, you know, this is when I concede a lot. And it's kind of funny because, you know, as a content creator, I know that there are people who play me in Live Arena who are like, oh, I'm playing against Colred. That's cool. You know, like they're getting excited for it. And they're maybe just trying really hard. And like, so they're taking a lot of time to try to decide what moves they are. And I'm just like, I know you're going to beat me and I don't want to have to wait 3.5 minutes for you to beat me. So I literally concede in the first 30 seconds. And they're like, Colred, come on, man. I was going to beat you. It's like, you did in the picks and bans, you beat me. I don't need to sit around and wait 3.5 minutes for you to stomp my champions into the dirt. But I will say also on the flip side of that, if I think there's a chance, if there's a path to victory, even if it's a small chance, I'm happy to keep playing it out, you know, because in Live Arena, you know, the difference between like a 45% win percentage and a 50% win percentage in a lot of cases is not just your champions, it's how creative you are, like how determined you are to solve the problem.
Yeah. I mean, a champ like that for me, one of these protector champs who also hits hard, Korugar Deathbell. You know, he's got the 75% damage mitigation, AoE, turn meter fill, cleanse, all that kind of stuff, and it hits hard. So Korugar Deathbell was definitely one of those champions for me early on. The protection strat is pretty good. Just outlasting the team. Yeah,
and that's why champions like we were just talking about Wukong in that perception build can be really helpful. You need a consistent buff strip somewhere. Yeah. You need it somewhere. And, you know, you could go with an old school champion like Cythalia or, you know, somebody else. Like we were talking about Lady Kimmy before, who's got like a single buff removal and a block buffs debuff. So there are a bunch of ways to get to that as well. My current one that I'm using is Odin because he's just so nasty. He's crazy good.
Yeah, for sure.
And he synergizes really well with both Arbiter and Shu Zhen. So that just gives me, you know, that flex aura if I want it at 40%, which is insane. But you do want to buff strip somewhere because if you come up against those protector teams, you're not going to burn through them with damage. It's just not going to happen. Right. You know? So you really need to be able to take their buffs away and then, again, know what their win condition is. And when you target the one champion you can kill, make sure you pick the one that's the right one, you know?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, those are some tips and tricks from one of the best free-to-play content creators in the community. Colred, thank you so much for coming on the channel. It was a pleasure to have you, a pleasure to talk some live arena, some Raid Shadow Legends today. Thank you for being here, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited. We're going to go over to my channel. We're going to have another conversation. We're going to talk about free-to-play life over there as well. This was really fun. So yeah, thanks for having me on the channel. I hope people enjoyed it, and come check out our other video too.
Of course, guys. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I have been Felris, and I will see you in another video.